Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Through the Pages. Today I have a heavyweight of a book for you, 17 Contradictions and the End of Capitalism by David Harvey. David Harvey is a professor of anthropology and geography at New York, or the Graduate Center of the City University of New York. I had to write that down. So I think it's a fascinating place to start, that he is looking at the world and populations, not so much revolution or like combative political elements, really just looking at populations, how they've been affected and shifts across the world, and the driving factor of them being capital. So now this book, even though it says the end of capitalism, I will say it's more focused on capital than capitalism, which was a very interesting distinction for me. I am, over the last year, in a phase of wanting to learn more about what I see as like the true left, meaning edging towards socialism, away from capitalism. And I think to understand the root of that is capital. And I'm certainly not ready to dive into Karl Marx. I just know I would sit there staring at it and the words wouldn't, I just know I couldn't do it. So I've read some sort of like preliminary, beginning to understand socialism, but this was probably the most like academic type book, or the book where I learned the most, not to say that those two things mean the same thing, but just, it was a challenge, it was the right amount of challenge, I'll say. And I think that's the beauty in this book, that I feel like anyone with like a little bit of a groundwork, or at least a lot of interest, would gain a lot from this book. So as the title suggests, it's broken down into 17 contradictions of this system of ours called capitalism. And some more disastrous than others, but I think breaking it down into that, it made the book very absorbable. And like I said, just learned a lot in it. And some of it is innate, like as you read it, or like I agree almost in a foundational sense that makes you feel like I knew that, like I recognize that was wrong, but like digging into it further helps me to understand like foundationally, like, oh yeah, that can't be. And so to see that capital basically just continue to plow forward regardless of what's in its path, doesn't matter, it's just going to keep going and going and going, that was fascinating. And certain terms like fictitious capital, and there's a lot I learned it, but now like that fictitious capital, we'll start there. And I won't go through all of my notes on this book. I have more notes on this book than I think any book I've ever read. And if you know me talking about like the gut health books, like that's my jam. And like so all these pages of notes, and then I was a little off my book there, but all that too. So so much to absorb in it, but not in an off-putting or where I would finish a chapter and be like, I don't know if I got that. Like there was only one chapter, I think it was chapter 12, where I was like, this is deeper econ than I'm probably primed for. But I also feel like this is probably one of the more approachable books of his. But so the fictitious capital, this is people moving numbers on a screen that don't generate value. You make something and sell it, that's because you made something, you contributed something to society. Or something like a title loan, or something where like, we'll do this, you'll give us money, and then you'll have less money, and then we'll work this, and the numbers will be different. That's a person just working fictitious capital. They don't contribute anything to society, to culture. They just displace capital, essentially. They're not helping anything. And recognizing those institutions and seeing, ultimately, I mean, it's understandable that people would go to it, especially, you know, say you got a family, I see it in here to make some dollars happen, but it's a system that kind of pushes us towards that, you know, even in the broader sense, like the military-industrial complex, innovating for innovation's sake, you know, just there was on like feeding at the trough of public funds for innovation's sake. Like, none of us are saying like, man, I want the tanks we have right now, I want a better one. Like, we're good. Like, we need schools and shit. And so like, I think when we recognize kind of the nature of capital a little bit more, we see how it's determining so much in our life and in our political system and even locally. So I wouldn't say that he offered a lot of solution in it, and maybe that's not a fair thing to say, because it's not a book for socialism. I'll say that it's more understanding the opposite, and that's very helpful. I mean, I learned a lot in it, and it's a book I'd probably like to read again. But I know this man's written like 27 books. I want to read more from him, and he has guides for, like, say you're going to read Karl Marx's Capital. Like, he has guides for that. So that's where when I say like this is probably one of his easier books, I think he's probably brilliant beyond what is even in this book. And I'm so glad, like, when I finished that book, I was like, oh, does he have more books? And then I saw the list, I was like, oh, okay, this is a man I'm going to learn from, like, a lot. And so anytime you can find not only like a book, but like an author like that, I feel like the value is so deep. Like, so when I, you know, in this book, I've just felt like learning I gained from it was incredibly beneficial, but having struck upon this author, thanks to Charlie Cole, a friend who is much further into socialism, communism, and like the economics of it, not the social media. I think, you know, like kind of liberalism vocal side of it, like truly econ, like this would make sense. Like, he's very much more educated than I am, and so he kind of knew where I'm at, like scale wise and stuff. So like, he's read Marx and a lot of that stuff, and so a Leninist, but knows, like, probably couldn't hand me the last book he read, because I'd be like, I don't know it. And so this was a very good like primer, and he has said like a lot of his books are building on things, you know, this came out this year and then this person released this, kind of building on that. And so like, I'm not ready for that web, I know it. And so to have something that felt like I got an understanding of history yet was very contemporary allowed me to learn a lot from it. And so I want to read books to learn, not to cross them off. You know, that's why I haven't read Communist Manifesto, because there's gonna be a time when I read it and I'm gonna understand it. That's more important to me than saying like, I read it, put it on the shelf. Like, this book, I think, for everyone posting socialism stuff or anti-capitalist stuff, I think this is an incredible foundation to put a real depth of knowledge into that passion. Because it's one thing to oppose things, but you have to know what you're going to build. And so I think learning about socialism and learning about the underpinnings of capitalism and capital itself, and why in its nature it will always lead to monopolies, and the smaller businesses will always get crushed. And that capitalism does have racist tendencies and sexist tendencies, and favors first world countries versus what we would call third world, and understanding that is super helpful. But I think the marrying of those two will allow someone to really hold their own in discussions in a way that can help move the ball forward. So this book felt very much like a tool in my tool belt as I develop my own political understanding, and not in knowing that understanding is not something I'm just internalizing. I do want to be putting things out there. I do want to help guide friends or anyone who's interested into this sort of stuff, because we're not going to get it from television. You know, like, it's pretty rare where you're going to see like CNN be like, here's how we break down capitalism. Like, it just isn't going to happen. And so to skip those vanguards but go to a trusted source is unique. It's not some alternate, some super left-wing, I run like a little left-wing blog and here's my book. Like, this man's a professor, written over 24 books on this stuff, and is well regarded. I really think this is probably, definitely economically, but I was going to say like politically, the most informative book I've ever read. And I would say that's probably still true. I don't know what would contend that. So, yeah, this book, I wouldn't say like cracked me open because it wasn't so stark new. It wasn't, you know, like an acid trip. It's just like, holy shit, my whole world is different. Like, it gave substance to my feelings in a sense. And I know feelings shouldn't really be a part of econ, but like, I've known, or you can see tendencies of a system and oppose it, but to understand the mechanisms more gives me a feeling like it can truly be dismantled. And that is a form of optimism and hope. And so I'll take any of that I can get these days. But yeah, I'll tell you right now, probably even before the end of the year, there will be more David Harvey books on here. If you have read any other David Harvey books, drop a comment, please. Tell me, where do I go next? Or if there's any David Harvey book you've wanted to read and thought, if only I heard some weird dude from Peoria like review it, that would help me. Comments. That's where it's at. But yeah, any feedback on this I would really appreciate. I hope to do more books like this on here, but like I said, I want it to be books that I understand, you know, and not that everything needs to be dumbed down or anything, but like this hit it just right. There's a right amount of challenging. I chewed on this book for like 2 weeks and distilled a lot from it. I was reading the notes ahead of time and I was like, how much of this do I mention in there? But I was like, you know what? That almost just gets to where it's like a summary of it and not like a review of it. And so kind of like with a novel where I try not to have like spoilers in there, all the like terms and key things that like I love, like I mentioned the fictitious capital, but that's a dime a dozen. There's tons of that stuff in here. And so I want you to discover it. But yeah, if you're into this sort of like what I see is actually left leaning, not just like Democrat, like just a hair past center, truly left. Capitalism, 17 Contradictions in the End of Capitalism it's a great place to start. Thank you for checking this one out. If you're still watching, that means we're on the same vein politically. What's up, friend? But yeah, like, subscribe. That's super helpful. I will say I just got past 1,000 views, and I know in the scheme of the internet, that's not a lot, but to me, I'm very happy about that. I've connected with a guy from India who likes the books, and I like the books he's reading and stuff, so like, I'm very happy with how this channel is blossoming, even in its own kind of small way. So if you're watching this and hearing me speak this right now, give a thumbs up or some sort of, let me know. But yeah, thank you for checking this out.